I'm here today with Jesse of Kenmo to talk about Null, out September 23rd, and Artifact Records. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing about as good as you can, although I have a bit of a headache. It seems every time we rehearse on a Sunday, I get a headache by Tuesday, and it lasts for days. I don't understand what the hell's happening here. I think it's
Maybe
just
it's
my
like a
40s.
maybe it's like a hangover. So what you need then is to rehearse again on Monday so that you can kind of blend it all in and the headache will go away.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we're rehearsing tonight and then Thursday, but maybe I didn't do it soon enough. I shouldn't have just gone to the gym yesterday. I screwed it up.
Yeah, you broke the whole rhythm of how the order of the universe should have been.
Yeah, that and I think I'm just getting old.
It's probably more of the option B than
Yeah.
option A. Let me ask you about this record. What is the catalyst for the creative process as far as Null is concerned, and how much of that catalyst has changed over the years?
It's actually a funny one because I know when people are younger and getting into writing music, there's a certain drive or a certain curiosity about it that pulls people toward writing. At this point in my life, it's very much a creative catharsis that needs to happen in order to keep depression from consuming me. And with this latest batch, I mean, we'd started to write new material prior to the pandemic landing. And when it happened back in March of 2020, I threw everything that we'd been writing out. I just felt like it all felt insincere at the time and had to start from scratch. This is kind of a long-winded answer because the process changed a fair amount, and I taught myself how to use a digital audio workstation in probably, it wouldn't have even been in the first month of the pandemic. I realized I had to do something. I had to pivot. I had to keep myself occupied because all the normal things that I do, writing in a jam space and going to the gym and practicing martial arts, like I couldn't do any of it. I had to do something to keep myself from going crazy. So I learned how to use Reaper. I started teaching myself how to program MIDI drums. I started learning how to record like full songs and piecing them together on a computer. And that was really the stimulus for this whole process for what would become a 2-album arc that we've created for ourselves here. And we're just starting the process of releasing this first one.
And that was good. You just kind of segued into my next question, which was going to be about that 2-album arc. So can you elaborate a little bit on the project, on the idea of having these 2 albums interconnected?
Yeah, we didn't mean to have 2 albums in the first place. It was just, it kind of came out of necessity based on when we were able to record. We wanted to record with the producer that did the last record with us, Loved, Andrew Schneider, who lives in New York. And our original plan was to have him come up to Winnipeg in July of 2021. And where we're from, Manitoba specifically, we were still in lockdown in May of 2021 when we were trying to decide, like, can we fly him up here? That and Canada hadn't opened its borders to non-essential workers yet. So we pivoted. We decided we'd try again in the fall. And the whole plan with that was to record whatever we had, whatever we felt comfortable recording. And by the time we finally got him up here in basically the end of September, early October, we had 75 minutes worth of music and we recorded all of it. And the reason we decided to separate it in 2 albums, I don't feel like we're the kind of band anyone wants to listen to 75 minutes straight. I think that would be a commercial catastrophe in terms of losing money for us, putting out a double album and expecting people to pay attention for 75 minutes. I keep joking that if I wanted to basically throw away 3/4 of that material, that's what we should do. But instead, we're going to put it out as 2 distinct albums because the material ended up sorting itself out that way. I feel like the 2020 batch of songs that were written fit better together, and the 2021 batch of songs fit together better than the others. So essentially it's 2 records from 2 different periods with a couple exceptions. Like the ending of Null was actually, I think, the last song written as part of all of this. So And that's Unresponsive, the track that we debuted last week.
I love your self-awareness when it comes to knowing exactly how much you can ask for of the fans of the band. So that's something that not everybody has, but it's really interesting to see that you have that thought process. Now, when you're putting these two albums together, is there something as far as a theme that ties them in, or is just the fact that they were kind of created within the same bubble, for lack of a better term?
The theme that is kind of concurrent throughout the whole 2 album arc is very much dealing with your own mental health through the pandemic when your coping mechanisms have been stripped away, and a basic reaction to everything that was going on throughout that whole period. You'll see, especially once people are able to actually hear the Void record, which is coming out next year, and as you are able to consume No, you'll note a more frantic, frustrated, and almost crazed feeling on No, followed by a more melancholy and deeply disappointed feeling on Void. And it kind of followed our general state of being throughout the 2-year arc. I mean, I'm still so deeply disappointed in everyone.
You graduated from being pissed off to just kind of like being aware that, you know, there's nothing I can do. This is just, it's just what it is.
Yeah, and I'm just very deeply sad about it all. And that's the unfortunate thing too, is I've lamented this online. I feel like, because I've put a lot of work into trying to make myself a less angry and better person over the last decade, and the pandemic just undid like 10 years worth of work. I'm just as frustrated and furious as I was in my 20s, which in your 40s, your body can't take that kind of stress.
So you use the music then as an escape, as an outlet for that stress that your body can no longer handle?
Certainly. And I also am just dealing with more injuries now, as discussed with the old neck.
This album, no, outside of the pandemic, that obviously threw a huge amount of challenges to you guys. Was there any other thing that you felt like was new, as far as a new hurdle or a new wall that was put in front of you when creating this album?
I mean, traditionally, we've written things in the jam room, and especially like the last few records since Scott joined the band back in 2014, him and I have a very like almost like state of consciousness process of constructing and creating riffs where we're reacting to one another. And a lot of that got stripped away, at least with the Null record, where I was kind of writing in isolation. And I actually put the majority of this record together on my own and then taught the rest of the band it, with the exception of the songs The Tie and Lost Grip, which Scott and I wrote together when he could actually come to Winnipeg, which was like, I want to say August of 2020. And then we went right back into lockdown in the fall. So, but more 2021, we were actually able to do the thing the way we normally do, but with demoing that I'd now picked up and was able to do on my computer. So we were able to add a lot of different elements with synthesizer and piano and saxophone. And we got to have more fun with the writing process, I think, in quotes, fun, because of how we've now changed the process.
Do you look at putting yourself a little bit outside of your comfort zone when it comes to writing a record, or has everything happened to you a little bit more organic and you're not really thinking about those finer details?
Yeah, we're very much approaching it in more of an organic manner. I feel like if the stuff doesn't fit, it just doesn't make it. We're creating for the sake of creating at the time. Although once we kind of get a better overall picture of what the album's looking like, then we start to get a little more critical and almost don't even explore ideas when they come up if they feel too similar to something we've done before. Which, I mean, when we were coming up with the material for these 2 records, we probably wrote twice as much material as we ended up using. And most of it'll probably never see the light of day just because it sounds too much like something we've already done. And I know to untrained ears, they probably think all the songs sound the same anyway. But I mean, people who actually care about this music do acknowledge the differences in the songs themselves. So as much as we're self-deprecating on that, I acknowledge that.
For those that haven't had a chance to listen to the album, If you had to give them a tidbit in terms of what is the most important sonic element of this record, what would you say that element would be?
Like in terms of any one song, or are you
In
talking
general, more in general terms.
I'd say to pay attention to the way synthesizer plays a role in the way these songs came out, because some of them, some of the initial ideas were constructed on synth first, and we built the songs around them. And I think it gives a different feeling on this record than any other record prior to this, which is cool. I mean, we're playing with new toys, and I hope people pick up on the fact that it sounds different and like it.
And like it. That's important
Yeah.
too. This record has definitely that a little bit of that, maybe more than a little bit of that 80s, 90s industrial vibe to it. What is it about the sound of that era, that industrial sound of the 80s, 90s, that resonates with you now in 2022?
I don't know, maybe it's the degree of nihilism and existentialism that they all covered. It just feels more, it feels so apt now, because so many of the things that they were bringing up then have actually got worse today in regards to a lot of the social issues. And I feel like the execution of the music was more honest because of the limited tools they had. So everything you heard was recorded to tape with microphones, and you had to build these sounds on your own. And so much of today's music, like, people can fake it. And I don't know. I feel like a lot of that music is just more honest than a good deal of the music being put out today. And that's probably what was influencing this package of 16 songs more so than anything else.
When you're going through the process of creating these songs, at what point in time do you start thinking about the lyrical content?
I was writing kind of all throughout it as we were. And admittedly, I'm lazy when it comes to lyrics. I don't write when I don't need to, and when I'm writing music at a faster pace, I'll write more consistently. And realistically, I should be doing it all the time, because it's a good way to flex that creative part of your brain, and you'll end up getting better material out of it. But there's just so much to do all the time that I admittedly get lazy. So I usually, I'll wait until there's a backlog of a few songs, and then I'll start writing more poetry that I inevitably have to then fit to music. But yeah, I wish I was better with that, but I'm not. But I through the pandemic, I was actually surprisingly quick at constructing vocal parts and lyrics for the songs. And I think that contributed to the honesty of some of this material, because a lot of the lyrics themselves were written in one chunk. Like, historically, at least the last few records, I've done a lot of editing where I'm piecing together good parts from a bunch of different writing sessions. And with these, I would sit down and I'd write out a page, and a lot of the time that page would become a song, which there's this, as I felt, there was a certain honesty to that kind of approach that just felt right for this material. Whether or not anyone else gives a shit, I don't care.
It's a little bit just about you.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's what this was. So it's gravy if people like it and want to buy it and have a visceral reaction themselves. But ultimately, the whole reason all of this happened was my own ego scratching that itch, and to try and get myself through this period.
Yeah, it's an interesting aspect, because you're opening up the book a little bit in terms of who you are and the things that you went through. And then if people want to take that journey into that book and into who you are, great. If they don't, then it was never really meant to be. I think that's kind of
Yeah,
the best approach.
and I mean, that's art in general, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I just feel
Yeah,
that sometimes with certain music, the artist tends to cater to who the listener is going to be versus catering to themselves first, and then hoping that the listener comes along for the journey. I think if, like you were saying, you're a lot more truer to the process and to who you are if you follow that line of thought versus trying to create something that's going to appeal to a specific audience.
yeah, 100%. And I mean, we've been entirely self-deprecating throughout most of our career, because, like, this band isn't our livelihood. We're not catering to a certain fan from yesteryear. We're doing this for our own egos. Like, we make money doing other things, so we're doing this for fun. as much as sometimes it's really not fun.
Yeah.
But like, we're doing this because we love this. So if we're not feeling artistically fulfilled, like, what the hell are we doing with our lives? Like, there's no point to beating a dead horse that nobody likes.
You have some incredible quotes today. Like I honestly, I'm gonna copyright some of them, or at least I'm gonna use them before you copyright them, so that I can claim them as my own.
Yeah.
You mentioned how visceral the record is. I mean, the sound on this album is incredible from that point of view, but it's as equally incredibly vocally. The two experiences are very similar to one another. Was that just the vocal aspect? Was just that the natural output based on the sound you had created? Is that where the symbiosis comes from?
Yes and no. One of the unique things about this package of material, vocally speaking, in terms of capturing it, I blew my voice out like the week before we went into the studio. And part of it was like there was an awful lot of wildfires last year, and like the Manitoban environment was smoky for most of August and September. And I feel like that had a serious impact on my throat when we got into rehearsing properly, since Scott lives in Saskatoon, which is 8 hours from us. Um, I guess I was just overexerting and I blew my voice out. So I was only able to actually record one song when Andrew was in Winnipeg. So I bought like a nice fancy preamp. I'd already had a bunch of the equipment that I could get this done at home to begin with, other than that one preamp. And I tracked all the vocals on my own through, I guess, mostly November and December, which allotted me the time to get really, really specific with each performance. And in some cases, like I'd do 3 sessions to do one song, which in the past, like I'd be rushing everything in the studio to try and get it done, hoping my voice wouldn't blow out. So I got to be super specific. I got to do all kinds of backing vocals and experiment a lot more with my own voice. And the way Andrew ended up putting it all together sounded, I think, just phenomenal. It's the best I think my voice has ever sounded. And that's me as like a 40-year-old man.
Yeah, I agree. I think it sounded phenomenal. I was really taken back by how powerful the album is across those two very important elements, the sound and then obviously the vocals that bring the lyrics to the forefront that help paint the picture. Now, as a fellow Canadian, I'm in Toronto, so I'm a fellow Canadian. I have to ask you, are you looking at this album with perhaps a little bit of a Juno in the future? Do you worry about that kind of stuff? You care about that kind of stuff?
We joke about that kind of stuff because, like, obviously, like we won one like a decade ago, and
You're
we've been
due. You're
nominated.
due.
We've been nominated for every album since. But like every time we prepare to put out a new album, we amongst ourselves say, "Well, we're not going to get nominated this time. This will be the one that doesn't get nominated." So like, don't get your hopes up.
I doubt it, though. I doubt it. I think at the
Who
very least,
knows?
you're
Who
going to get a
knows?
nomination. At the very least, you're going to get a nomination.
The nominations are always nice, and I mean they feel good. And it's funny. I was actually talking to KW from Vile Creature like a couple hours ago, who they were nominated for their last record, and I was saying like in the moment when you're there, you can acknowledge within yourself that you know that you won't win, but when you're there in that moment, everything inside you is going, "I want to fucking win that thing. If I don't win that thing, I'm gonna kill everyone."
I wanted to ask you the follow up to that question, which was like, I always hear people say, I have a lot of friends that have been nominated, and they always say to me, "Oh, it's just an honor to be nominated." And I'm like, dude, come on, like don't give me that shit. You want to win, like you just
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
win. I mean, at the
you
end of the
do.
day, you're there to win it.
As much as it feels ridiculous playing this kind of music and expecting to win like a national award, yeah, when you're there in the heat of the moment, it's like, well, why the fuck can they win and not me? We're better. We wrote a better record. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I don't have my hopes up. I feel like this is a better record than the record we did win for a decade ago. But like, you never know what people want. And frankly, I don't care. I think we've become very reconciled with the fact that what we want in music is generally not what others want. Like even with me trying to put together the touring cycle for this whole thing, all the bands that we're interested in don't bring enough heat. And like we're one of those bands that we're probably like, in terms of where our place in the world is, generally speaking, a lot of metal tours have kind of like the big headliner or like a co-headliner situation. But if it's like a classic 3-band tour, you're gonna have the headliner, you're gonna have a good sized like middle band, and then like that floating opener is usually like kind of bands that are cutting into that next level of the industry. We are at the very, very, very low end where we're barely a 2 of 3. We could be in the middle, but we're like a really bad draw for that position. So we're not really a band that anyone wants to tour with. And we know our place in the industry. So we're like, the last bunch of years, we focus on kind of our own headlining stuff, or bands that are emerging where they're going to for sure surpass us, but we're going to grab them to co-headline with us before they reach that point. So a lot of the bands that we actually want to play with probably aren't even in that 1 of 3 range, but they're aspiring to it. So I acknowledge that like most of what we like, not a lot of people like.
But having said that, you guys have a tour in the works, right? Like there's a tour schedule, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going out with Frail Body, who for sure by next year will be more popular than we are.
your your self-awareness is incredible. I mean, at least you're honest with yourself, either and maybe by saying this, it has like a little bit of a reverse psychology effect on it. You never know.
Maybe, who knows? I mean, and we've been joking about this a whole lot. Maybe this will be the one. 23 years in, maybe this will take off. We'll become famous on this one. Probably not, but
You never know. You never know.
you never know.
Never know until you
Crazier
try.
things, yeah, crazier things have happened.
Last question for you. Being a Canadian musician, uh, living in the part of the world that you live, you don't live in a big city center. Like when people think of Canada, they think Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. Those are normally the 3 cities that everybody thinks of. Toronto being the center of the universe, as we all know. So,
Yes.
being a Canadian musician in the situation that you're currently in, is there walls even bigger for you to surpass? That perhaps if you were in a city like Chicago or New York, more doors would be open and less walls would be put in front of you?
Yeah, I mean, like we live in Winnipeg, like you mentioned, like the closest city with 1 million people in it is Minneapolis, which is about a 7-hour drive away and an international border. The closest Canadian city with 1 million people is Calgary, and that's about a 15-hour drive away. Toronto, the center of the universe, is a 24-hour drive away. Like, we're not close to anything. If we were in Chicago, we'd probably have much better access to general media in the US. And just even if you're there, like, you can do a weekend trip over to New York.
Mhm.
We have to dedicate like 3 weeks to get to New York and back. So I mean, that's part of why we've treated the band the way we have, and why we kind of emerged as a force on the touring scene after 10 years of already being a band, because it's just there are those barriers, and you have to be willing to throw your entire life away to get out of this city. And that's what we did, and we're hoping that people continue to pay attention to us as we have passed into this new phase of our careers, where we still work day jobs but try to tour when we can. And so far it's been working. Who
Yeah.
knows if it'll continue, but I mean, we're just trying to do the thing as best we can, and we'll continue to.
Well, Jesse, was a delight, an absolute delight speaking to you today. So
Well,
thank you
thank
very
you, sir.
much for taking the time. Ken Mode, Null, out September 23rd on Artifact Records. Once again, Jesse, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and I hope people go pick that thing up.
Yeah, yeah. If you want some violence and anger, go get it.
Yep, it's a special Canadian breed of it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely has a little bit of a Canadian flavor. You normally don't see Canadians as being angry, but there's always a little bit of anger inside all of us.
Oh yeah, and this is that glimpse. Anyway,
Take care, man.
take care,
All
my
the
man.
best.
Thank you very much. You too.